This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast.
Well, I love you, babe. I love you, stop. You walk the bar, drop me walk. I love you once, I love you twice. A big bomb, baby, you're a awful now.
Johnny Powers from 1957 with the song Long Blonde Hair and Rose Red Lips, singing just so evocatively about the excitement and the kind of zing that you get from having a big fat crush on someone. He's singing it. So that is what we're talking about on today's podcast, is not just the experience of having a profound crush on another person, but really the complexity and, pros and cons of developing a romantic crush on someone when you are in a committed long-term relationship. That's not something that we like to think about. And it happens. It happens a lot. And I'm going to be giving you some very actionable advice on what to do and what not to do to turn that experience into something that can actually make your current relationship be even better and juicier and more awesome. And also, some real what not to do's, because we don't want you to have an affair and blow up your life either. And that is a risk when you develop a crush on someone else. So that's where we're going today on the podcast. But hey, if this is your first time listening, hello, and I'm so glad that you found me and that you found this. I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I'm the founder and clinical director of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching. We're based in Denver, Colorado. We have offices all up and down the Front Range, and we also see people all over the world through online video. So we specialize in love, happiness, and success. So we're all about couples counseling and relationship coaching to help you have better relationships. And we also specialize in individual therapy and life coaching to help you be a happier, more satisfied, more actualized person. And then we also do a lot of work with people around success. So we do career coaching, executive coaching, leadership coaching, which, is helpful to people who are figuring out what they want to be when they grow up and how to be, more successful in their chosen path. But also, I think we do a lot of success work in helping people figure out their whole lives, like what do you need to have in your life in terms of your relationship, in terms of your self-actualization and your personal growth, as well as your kind of objective success with your career, your finances, just in order to feel like you're doing what you were put here to do. So that's what our practice is all about. That is what this podcast is all about. And that's what I'm all about. So I am a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also a board certified coach. And I weave all of those things into this podcast in order to get you actionable advice that speaks to what's going on in your life and helps move you forward on that path of personal growth. So today I wanted to talk about this concept of crushing when it's not convenient, because we've been getting some questions about this in our practice. People writing in and being like, hey, is this okay? And also having people in our practice who have unfortunately suffered through one of, I think, the most just traumatic, heartbreaking things that you can go through, which is an affair in your relationship. Affairs can just blow up, not just relationships, but families. I mean, your whole life can be a smoking ruin if you allow yourself to get involved in an affair. And, I will also say, as we've discussed on this podcast before, couples can and do get through that and go on to rebuild happier, healthier relationships than ever before. But it's so, so hard. And I am of the opinion that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's why I'm always talking about, how to protect your relationship and how to keep it strong and healthy. That's why we do so much premarital counseling in our practice, because, it's great when people come to us when they're really in trouble and when it feels like their relationship is on the rocks. But boy, it would just be so much better if nobody got to that place to begin with. So that is what this episode is all about. I'm going to be talking a lot about the crushes and what it's like and why they happen and whether or not it's normal, what to do with those to actually help your relationship, and again, what not to do so that you protect yourself and your partner and your family from regrettable things happening. So, first of all, I would like to just jump right in and start by dispelling a myth. And this myth is, if I am happily married, if we have a good relationship, neither myself nor my partner would ever develop romantic feelings for someone else. That is not true. You can have a very healthy, happy, satisfying, long-term relationship with two people who are very committed to each other, and have one of those people or both of those people at various points start to develop kind of tingly feelings for someone else. And we are, as you've heard me talk about so many times, biologically hardwired to develop pair bonds with other people. We have machinery baked into our brains, into our physiological systems, into our endocrine systems that really are there by and for the purpose of falling in love with someone else. When you think about it, it makes sense. When we go back to survival of the species, human beings are a very collective society. We need to form communities and relationships in order to survive. Now, we sort of instinctively do it, but if you throw yourself back 20,000 years ago, a single human wandering around in the prehistoric forest would not have lasted very long. We are a collective tribe society, so forming those larger bonds, but also in our family systems. When two people come together and have a ferociously strong pair bond, both with each other and with their children. When you think about how helpless human babies are, right? And how hard it is and how much energy it takes to raise a human child to fruition, that would not happen unless we were absolutely devoted to that little baby's health and well-being. So we are hardwired to do that. And the way that this starts is with infatuation. And romantic infatuation begins with having kind of warm feelings for someone, having a little kind of zing when we're in the presence of someone else. We have very positive impressions of that person. We think everything they do is kind of awesome. And they also begin to bloom in our mind. So in addition to sort of feeling excited when they're around, we also think about them when they're not around. We imagine, what might they be doing? What might they be thinking about? Are they thinking about me? We have little conversations with them in our mind's eye. And that is also a fundamental truth of human attachment, is that it happens in person, but we internalize our others. And that is why we can maintain attachments and relationships with people that we are not actually with in that moment. Like, I don't know, maybe birds and dolphins do that kind of thing too, but human beings, we think about are people who are waiting for us, and that's why we go home. And so it's having those attachments that exist even when we're not in proximity to someone else. And we use our brain for that, our capacity to imagine and envision. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the excuse me, like the nerdy, sciencey aspects of this, to put the other things that I'm about to talk about in context so that they make sense. And so when we form relationships and, get into marriage with somebody in a long-term relationship, that romantic infatuation experience, that exists to really weld people together. That is the fiery furnace that fuses two souls, and then they, according to nature's plan, they get married, start making babies. And that fiery romantic feeling only lasts between about 2 and 4 years. Again, if we put it back into a biological perspective, that's about as much time as it takes to get pregnant and raise a baby into a toddler who can tell you what it wants and put food into its own mouth and is, relatively self-sufficient. That is not to say that human relationships are intended to end after 2 or 4 years, but what happens is that they do change. It's not that tingly, excited, like obsessed with you feeling. It is more of a warm, kind of constant attachment. So fond feelings, feeling like you're home when you're with your person, they're your best friend, your irreplaceable other, but you don't, your heart doesn't leap into your throat when they walk into a room. Now, I will tell you that if that pair bond attachment is threatened, people can and do go absolutely bananas. You might not think about your husband or wife that much 15 years in, except for just kind of those fond, warm, you're so great kinds of feelings. But if something happened that would threaten that, if they, pulled away, if they told you they didn't want to be with you anymore, that's when people freak out. So don't be lulled into thinking that just because day to day you're not in this crazy feeling obsessive love doesn't mean that it's not extremely powerful. It's just kind of more simmering underneath the surface. Whereas that early stage romantic infatuation, that's the one that we feel. That is what I think we in our culture have come to think of as being air quote love, that love is having those sizzly feelings and excitement and kind of nervousness when they're around and craving to be with them and thinking about them all the time. And there they are, right? So just because we are married and have that stable, enduring, deep attachment to our partner, that is almost like a different system. It's like a different brain system. And I'm going to say something, well, it's not shocking if you've heard this podcast before, but if you haven't, welcome, is that love is really biologically addictive. And I use that word in a good way most of the time, because just like somebody develops a very powerful attachment to substances where they do, crazy things to get more of, human beings have that capacity to get attached to other human beings, and that make human beings do not crazy, but things that mothers lifting burning cars off their children kind of thing. I mean, we can do amazing things out of love for our people. And other research actually suggests that the reason why we are capable of getting addicted to illicit substances is because the structures in our brain implicated in those unhealthy addictions actually exist for the purpose of human pair bonding. And so one way of looking at a heroin addiction or a cocaine addiction is that person has actually become attached to a substance as a replacement for human, meaningful and enduring human relationships. I could go on a big tangent about that, and I'm not going to. But what I will tell you is that kind of enduring long-term attachment it uses the same part of your brain as what is implicated in an opiate addiction. So, you have a lot of functional opiate addicts out there who just kind of like maintain their addiction. They don't feel high anymore, but it's only when they stop using, and then it's like they go into, crazy withdrawal. So a lot of people in committed, long-term, healthy marriages are like that. Like, as long as they're going home to their partner and they're with their family, they don't really feel that like over the moon excitement until you take it away. Whereas the romantic, early stage romantic love is active in the same parts of your brain as a stimulant addiction. So think cocaine, think methamphetamines. It's a different kind of thing where people actually do feel high. They feel jazzed. They feel elevated. And when you are in early stage romantic love, it does a very similar thing to you. And it occupies the same regions of your brain, and it squishes out a lot of the same neurotransmitters. So I just wanted to mention that because we're talking today about crushes and how and why they develop. And that is the reason why someone who is in a happy, comfortable, long-term relationship and who is in that like attachment phase of love can develop that sparkly early stage romantic excitement feeling for a different person, and that those two things can exist simultaneously. Very long-winded explanation and getting into a lot of the like science behind it, but this myth is so pervasive that if I have a happy relationship, neither my spouse could ever develop romantic feelings for someone else. It is not true. And what makes me so crazy is that particularly when people have affairs, there is often this assumption that the partner who stepped outside of the relationship did so in response to something that was happening in their marriage. And that can be true sometimes, certainly, but a lot of times that was not the case. And so I see these poor partners who have been cheated on, and they're also like kind of blaming themselves, or their partner is blaming them, because that's the myth in the culture, is that, well, if you had been a different kind of partner, I wouldn't have done this, which is just not true. So let's just take that and squish it up in a little ball and throw it out the window. And let me tell you instead what does happen. People, any of us, going about our lives, at our jobs, at our gym, at the friend groups, places we hang out, come into contact with other people who are attractive, interesting, witty, who might start to make us feel a certain way, kind of excited. Particularly people who have a kind of sexual vibe and are even a little bit dangerous. Create these physiologically arousing experiences in us when we are around them. And again, not a reflection of our spouse. It's just that we're human and that person is kind of hot, and it's, that's what we were built to do. So people often develop these like ring kinds of experiences when they're around a certain other. Now, while this is normal, I think it probably happens to every married person from time to time, not constantly, but yeah, looking back at my own marriage, my husband and I have been together 20 some years, and I would say probably twice I have had that experience. I'm sure my husband has. I haven't asked him about it because I don't really want to know, but I'm sure it has. But here's the point, is that these feelings of romantic infatuation, let's think of them on like a scale from 1 to 10, okay? And a 1 is that you feel totally neutral about a person. It's like there's your friend, somebody that you enjoy, and you're not obsessing about them or thinking sexual thoughts about them or anything like that. And on the other end of that scale, that spectrum, a 10, that is someone that you believe you love, you are obsessed with them, you would do anything to be with them, you would do shockingly air quote, immoral things to be with them. You would lie and cheat and steal, If we, again, go back to this addiction type model, a 1 is someone who has not ever done opiates and has no intention to, and is like, yeah, whatever. And on that other scale is you have somebody who's profoundly addicted and who is breaking into their little old grandmother's house and stealing her purse and hating themselves for it, but that addiction is so much more powerful than it feels like their self-control and their will and their values even are. So let's put those romantic feelings on that same kind of scale, all right? Now, when romantic feelings start, it starts at the shallow end of the pool. It's like a 2 or a 3, like a fondness for someone, or a little like, oh, hey, I think so-and-so is going to be at that meeting today, or I wonder if so-and-so is going to be at that meeting today, or, like getting a little happy when they IM you, that kind of thing if you're at work. And it's very easy for all of us to view that kind of like excitement about another person as being benign. It is innocent. You're standing at a cocktail party, your partner's probably right there or whatever, but you get to talk to this other person, and it's just a little bit more exciting than it is to talk to some people at that party, right? But it's very, very easy for us to all blow off those feelings as being like, yeah, whatever, yeah, he's cute, but whatever, we're both married, it's fine. And that, my friends, as long as you keep it there, nothing bad is probably going to happen. However, it's not going to stay there unless you intentionally make sure that it stays there. What often happens, and without people intending for it to happen, is just kind of a natural consequence of following your feelings, which, is why I also encourage people to consider that not all feelings are worth following, and that when it comes to especially stuff like this, we don't follow our feelings. We follow our values. We follow our commitments. We follow our inner wisdom, even if it's not nearly as much fun as following the feelings. Because if we all followed our feelings, we would eat chocolate cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we would, wander off after whatever attractive person we meet at a cocktail party, right? And not honor our commitments and our values to the other important people in our life. So, what happens is that when people don't kind of have that self-awareness and don't, maybe have not had the benefit of listening to a podcast like this one, and they have, kind of mildly exciting feelings about someone else, that they sort of naturally lean into and follow without thinking too much about it, is when they start talking to that coworker more, or sit next to that coworker in a team meeting, or at a after work happy hour, and then maybe let's go out to lunch together, and start talking about increasingly personal things, feelings maybe about the job, mutual frustrations. They kind of turn into venting partners. Over time, they might start talking about their relationships together. And as all of these kinds of, increasingly intimate conversations and more time start happening together, this infatuation starts like growing up that scale. Now it's a 4, and now we just, spent a lunch together kind of sharing our hopes for our lives, and, we always imagined we would do these kinds of things, and let me tell you how frustrated I am with my wife sometimes, and now all of a sudden it's like a 5 or a 6, and this biologically based romantic / addictive experience is growing, and it's kind of like dose dependent. The more you do it, the more time that you have together, the more kinds of intimate disclosures you have together. These feelings grow, and I will say that people don't consciously intend. Very rarely do they consciously intend for them to grow. I think that, again, there's a myth in our culture that the only people who engage in affairs are bad people, bad men, bad women who don't love their partners and who are immoral and have questionable judgment and they're, bad people. That is almost always not true too. Certainly psychopaths happen, right? But more often it is men and women who have these little crushes start that they don't have the awareness that, like, oh, this is a problem and I need to do something about that. So they lean in, they go to the lunches, they have the conversations, they start IMing back and forth at work during the day, and then they start texting back and forth at home. And then these things grow and grow and grow until they're spending more time outside of work. And oftentimes it really does frequently start as an emotional affair that is very easy to rationalize. And people begin putting more and more energy into these new dalliances and taking energy away from their primary partnerships so that, their spouse kind of seems more boring and frumpy than they did before. Side note, interesting finding from the field of social psychology, which I have always found so fascinating, is that whenever anyone is doing something immoral, illegal, harmful to another person, they try to come back to cognitive congruence, meaning that they feel okay about what they're doing. They have reasons for doing what they're doing, whereas the opposite, cognitive dissonance, is where somebody is like doing something crappy to another person and is like, yeah, that person is actually really nice. And so what does that mean about me? I must suck. That's a bad feeling. So people always try to create cognitive congruence, which when people get into emotional or sexual entanglements with affair partners, in order to kind of rationalize that and make that okay, they need to start demonizing and vilifying their partner. So they will begin having less and less positive experiences with their partner. They might start picking fights. They might develop this like narrative in their mind about what their partner is and isn't. Like, they're just not sexy. They're not fun. They're boring. They don't care about me. All they care about is the kids and work and blah, blah, blah. And I need more in my life. And this person makes me feel good and I deserve to be happy. And so I'm going to put more of my energy into this thing that I'm now actually having with this new person. And so they, that whole thing starts happening. They crave contact with their new person. They think about them all the time, and they find more and more opportunities to be with this new person until, finally they're at the top end of that range at, 7, 8, 9. And they are actually lying to their spouse about going on a business trip, and they're lying about what they're doing during the day, and they're having to air quote work late. I mean, I don't have to go into that. We all know what that can look like. So no one sets out to do this usually. But you can see, like, there were posts, like kind of warning signs along the way of somebody who did end up getting into an affair with another person, where it started out as a really seemingly innocent and benign crush. So let's talk about this a couple of different ways. First of all, well, let me also just say, though, actually, before I turn into that segment, that there is also another myth that these feelings that we can have for someone, these excited, romantic, like sparkly, thinking about you all the time feelings, there is a myth that those thoughts and feelings are indications that the person we're having those feelings for would be a good partner for us. That is also not true. We think about those feelings as like what love should be, because that's that like romanticized version. But that is really chemistry. That is early phase romantic love. And that also can turn on a dime compared to that really enduring long-term attachment phase of love. That phase of love is where people will, sacrifice for each other, put their needs underneath the needs of their partners and families from time to time, if necessary, and really that kind of like unconditional love experience. Whereas romantic love, we can become obsessed with another person. But say in the instance where someone does start having an affair and convinces themselves that they need to be with this other person, in the cold light of day, like after, the divorce, after there's no more sneaking around, after they're like actually living with this other person and trying to have a regular relationship as opposed to an affair, they can often have this feeling like, oh my God, what did I do? I don't know how much I actually like this person. I don't know that I trust them. They're not really that exciting once I'm here with them every day. They're kind of like every other person. And, while people are having affairs, they don't often have the insight into the fact that they're having a very emotionally heightened experience. And just the virtue of the secrecy and the tabooness creates this energy, this like aroused state that people easily confuse for feelings of love, and that any long-term secure relationship can never, ever compete with. And that, once they move out of an affair context into a regular relationship and they are no longer having the tabooness and the secrecy and the heightened, it's really just, having to communicate with another person and having to solve problems together and work as a team and figuring out what, who should do what around the house, just like any other freaking relationship. It sometimes is a great shock. And I can't even tell you how many times as a therapist and a marriage counselor, I have had really heartbreaking conversations with people who indulged these feelings, left a happy, fine marriage with children to pursue an affair partner, and a year or two later are sitting in my office in agony about having destroyed their marriage, having hurt their partner, having broken their vows, having sometimes really traumatized their kids and totally upended their children's lives, because, and they'll say things like, I lost my mind. And what they're trying to communicate is the fact that they got really caught up in this early stage romantic infatuation, which is very much like an addiction. It alters your state of consciousness. People feel kind of like they're on something. They think differently. They're not thinking coherently. And when that party is over, some people are like, I cannot believe that I did that. And now I have this shitty relationship with somebody that I don't like that much, and I don't trust them. And no, I don't want to marry this person. And how can I rebuild or mend, my relationship with my ex, who now wants absolutely nothing to do with me because I've destroyed their faith in me and I really ruined our relationship. I have had that conversation many, many times. So likewise, I'll say this, if any of you are listening to this who may have fallen in love with a married person, you too are vulnerable to this. There's an illicitness, there's an intoxication, there is a throw judgment out the door, throw values out the door in service of this big, huge thing we're both feeling right now, which feels so incredible. And at the end of the day, it can be really, really, really destructive, just like any other addiction, heroin, cocaine. I have not ever personally done either of those things, but I'm sure that they feel wonderful when you first start doing them, right? Like that's why people get hooked. And similarly, these kinds of crushes and infatuations, they feel like the sun and the moon and the stars, but they really can lead you astray. So now that I have explained all of this, let's talk about what to do instead. And first of all, I would like to just share, as I mentioned in the beginning, that, these things happen, and it's not some moral or characterological shortcoming because you start to develop warm feelings for an attractive other person, right? That simply happens. However, what we as committed, mature people who are in marriages and families that we have values around protecting and maintaining and upholding is being self-aware enough to say, you know what, I think I might like it a little too much when that guy Jack comes around, and I need to own that. Or when, Mary is at a meeting, I like those meetings a little bit more than I like the meetings where she isn't around. And so first of all, just having a little conversation with ourselves and acknowledging it to ourselves, and then saying, because that is true, I should probably limit my interactions with Jack or with Mary. So, there they are. They're I-aming me. I'm actually not going to respond to that for a few hours. And then when I do, I'm going to give them a very cut and dry answer to their professional question. And I'm not going to acknowledge the super fun, cutesy, smiley face personal thing that they were kind of trying to do with me right now. I am not going to engage with that. And it really requires some personal discernment, because you may have friends at work that you don't have any of those feelings for. I mean, you might enjoy their company, but you don't, you know what I'm talking about? That little sparkly feeling, you don't have that. And it's completely fine to have platonic friends. But when it turns into that zingy feeling, that's when we need to really step away from those interactions and really consciously avoid it. And I'm also going to suggest something that may be kind of shocking, but go home to your wife and say, you know what? I have to tell you something. That Mary at work has been, I think she's flirting with me. And there's a part of me that kind of liked it a little bit. And being very transparent about what is happening, because when you say those things out loud, they lose all their power. You have made it known to your husband or wife, who might be like, well, okay, that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, thanks for telling me. But it also, in doing so, you've just kept yourself safe, because when you flip the lights on with those things, it really kind of takes the power out of them. Whereas when you allow the secret to keep happening and when you're concealing it, that is like pouring fertilizer on those kinds of things. So first of all, saying it out loud. And then also, and you may have this conversation with your partner, you might not, but do some reflecting on what is different about my interactions with Mary than my interactions with my wife. And it really could be just that Mary is new, she's attractive, she's like, a new model or whatever, compared to your wife, who is a known quantity. You guys have told each other all the stories, all the newness has been extinguished in some ways. But thinking about, what is it about talking to Mary that is kind of exciting? And it could be, well, you know what, she hasn't heard all my stories yet, and she still thinks that I'm interesting. And so really, like, putting your finger on that, there's novelty there. And novelty is an ingredient that can help you re-energize a relationship that's starting to feel kind of tired. So going and doing something that feels different and exciting and maybe even a little bit dangerous for you and your partner that you haven't done before. So signing up for scuba diving lessons together at the Y, or going on not just a vacation, but maybe like buying a ticket and not having reservations. And you get there and let's just see what happens and see where we end up and see what feels like it is good to do in the moment, So because a super scheduled, like, I know exactly what I am going to eat and where I'm going to go and what I'm going to see, that doesn't really elicit that same kind of danger feeling as the sort of energy that it takes to re-energize a relationship. So thinking about that. Thinking about the kinds of conversations that you might be starting to have with that person that you have a crush on. Are you asking them, how are you? What'd you do this weekend? What do you think about that? And like laughing at their jokes and they're laughing at your jokes. You know, it's very easy in a stable, committed marriage to come home, wash your face, put on your sweatpants, flop down in front of the TV and watch like 7 hours of whatever and not really engage in meaningful conversation with our partners. And so I'd like to invite you to think about who you are when you are with that person that you are feeling kind of crushy around. Would you wash off all your makeup and put on sweatpants and be like, ugh, you know, and not talk to them? No, you are stepping it up. You're being witty, you're being fun. And so it's very easy, and particularly when people start, you know, getting more and more involved with other people, to put the other person on a pedestal and then kind of vilify their partner. But you really externalize that. You're making it about other people. And I would like to invite you to think about who you are being in different contexts, and for you to consider how your relationship might feel a little bit different if you were to put that same kind of energy into your interactions with your spouse, you know, sharing with them about your day. And also, you know what, if there have been things going on in your relationship where you're feeling like it's not an emotionally safe relationship, if you're feeling invalidated by them or feeling like they don't care, or if they would criticize you, and so you aren't talking to them because of anticipating that negativity from them, please do something about that, because that is not a black and white thing. That means that you guys have some work to do on your relationship. And everybody practically who gets involved in couples counseling, except for my favorite people who are being super proactive and like, yeah, you know, we're running into a little thing here, or like premarital clients, like, what can we do to keep our relationship healthy and strong? Like we teach them all these things going into it, right? But if you're having this kind of dynamic with your partner where it feels like you're blocked, you aren't able to have that kind of light, fun relationship with them, take yourselves into high quality couples counseling or relationship coaching with someone who knows what they're doing. So as I mentioned in my recent, you know, how to tell if you have a bad therapist podcast. So do not bring them in to see your therapist. Do not bring them in to a garden variety shrink who advertises couples counseling on their website, but actually has no training or experience in couples counseling. So you're wanting to look for a licensed marriage and family therapist, or certainly at least someone who has that training. And take your relationship there and say, you know what? I'm feeling disconnected from my partner. I'm feeling like it's hard for us to talk. You know, I recently was having some really pleasant interactions with someone that I was working with, and it was making me feel like, man, I wish that I could do this with my partner. And so, marriage counselor, I would like your support in helping us figure out what we need to do in order to recreate that kind of safety and positivity. Now, with in mind that it's not going to feel like early stage romantic love again, but that you can certainly have positive interactions and a much, much deeper experience than you can have with that early stage romantic love. So, those are all suggestions on what to do if you notice yourself having those feelings. To recap, first of all, be scrupulously self-aware. Second of all, when you notice those feelings happening, actively withdraw and, you know, shut the door so that you don't continue having interactions and positive experiences with that crushy as much as you can. And put your energy into your primary relationship, putting the positivity back into your relationship. And if that is feeling hard for whatever reason, just taking that as a sign, not that, oh, we shouldn't be together anymore and I need to find somebody else, but that, hey, you know what? Long-term relationships ebb and flow. Maybe we've both been neglecting each other, and how can we figure out how to really repair our bond, have more fun together, restore our friendship and the positivity in our actions so that we are the only one that each of us want to talk about when something interesting or exciting happens. And, you know, we are partners in crime and planning fun things together and really enjoying each other's company. So those are my success tips for you. And if you start to notice yourself having those kind of increasingly interested experiences, or, that heightened, like if you're kind of getting into that 3 or 4, like deeper into the pool, say that you have to work with someone closely at work, or, in a friend group, it's even more important to be very, very, very conscious about what is happening. And again, likening it to drugs. So, for example, who among us hasn't had the experience of needing pain medication? You had a dental procedure, you had a C-section or whatever, and, you're prescribed pain medication, and it is something that you need to do. And having that self-awareness to say, I'm actually really looking forward to taking that next Percocet, so maybe I should take a Tylenol instead. That is what that little conversation needs to sound like in your brain in order to prevent yourself from just kind of like going down that water slide and splashing into the pool of opiate addiction. And likewise, I'm really looking forward to my interactions with so-and-so, and so I need to take action to protect myself. If it's a work situation and you have the leeway, ask to be matched with someone else if you can. If you can't, be very buttoned up and do not engage on a personal level. And you might even have a conversation with that person where you're feeling that energy starting to sprout. Say, Mary, I think you're great, and I do enjoy our conversations, but I just need to remind you that I am married, and I'm happily married, and I'm very committed to my marriage, and so I feel like sometimes we've been getting a little flirtatious, and I'm not going to do that with you anymore. I value you as a colleague. And now, I will also say, just to take the wind out of anybody's sails here, it is also extremely common, particularly in workplaces, and not to gender stereotype, but I'm going to anyway, particularly with men, sometimes older men and younger women that they work with. Men can develop crushes on younger female colleagues. And because another psychological truism is that we tend to project our feelings onto other people, we assume that other people feel about us the way that we feel about them. And so I would like to caution you, many men, particularly in professional environments, and also as we have seen, kind of skidding to a halt, thankfully, in the context of this Me Too generation, think that young women being friendly and, kind, they take that as signs of mutual attraction and sexual interest. And so if you have any doubt about what might be happening, err on the side of assuming that she's probably just being friendly with you, and then just have that little conversation with yourself. This kind of feels flirty between me and Mary, but I am married. I intend to stay married. I'm committed to my relationship, and I need to nip this in the bud. So I'm not doing that with her anymore. And I'm also going to consider the possibility that I might be making her uncomfortable because I am being overly familiar. And the way that women sometimes react to men being overly familiar is that we protect ourselves by being friendly and by smiling and laughing because we don't know what else to do. And that is also something that I think is changing now in our culture, when women have more of a permission, if not a mandate, to be legitimately angry when they're having to deal with things that they don't want and that they didn't sign up for. So I hope that ebbs, but just consider that possibility too, that if you have a crush on someone, again, particularly in a co-working kind of situation, that you might also be embarrassing yourself if you were to do anything else with that. Embarrassing yourself and having the possibility of it turning into a lawsuit if you start to act on these crushy feelings that you're harboring. So for many, many, many reasons, it's important that you practice good self-awareness and restraint, and simply do not engage with people in that way. Now, if this is in a social situation, say you and your partner are friends with someone or another couple, and you're starting to develop crushy feelings for that, the other partner of the other couple that you guys go hang out with from time to time. Again, tell your spouse that, and own it, and don't spend as much time with them for a while. Put energy into your relationship, strengthening that bond, and then, eventually you can go back into those interactions once it has faded. So, proximity, increasing emotional engagement, secrecy, those are all things that will make a crush bloom and expand into the point where it crosses that point of no return kind of thing. And honesty, transparency, self-awareness, restraint, declining to spend time with that other person, those are all things that will kind of make it die and go away. And again, use these feelings as opportunities for growth for your own relationship, because by putting energy into your primary relationship, it will make it more fun and more enjoyable, and it will, cement your commitment to each other, and also be a very, very, very valuable lesson in understanding the way that people work, including you, and that not every feeling is worth following. That as mature adults, we don't always listen to our feelings and follow our feelings. We follow our values, and we honor our commitments, and we act with integrity, even if we want to eat all the chocolate cake. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. I'll be back in touch soon with more love, happiness, and success advice for you. Oh, hey, lastly, if you are getting things out of this, please say so. Review it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have anyone in your life who you think could benefit from listening to, advice on this topic or any other, I hope you share this podcast with them, because that is how we grow here. So thank you again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
I love you so, I can't let you go. Big bone baby, I love you so. Well, long blonde hair, rose red lips. When you walk the ball, my heart just slips. I love you once.